Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Let's call to order the annual meeting of the Assessment Appeals Board for July 16th, 2018. And we'll start with a roll call.
All right. I will call each of you in alphabetical order. Board Member Crow.
Present.
Board Member Curtis.
Present.
Board Member Ferris.
Present.
Board Member Hess.
Present.
Board Member Little.
Present.
Board Member Sisk.
Present.
And Board Member Stern.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vlahakis. And now let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, and we'll go next to item 4 on the agenda, election of chair and vice chair for Appeals Board number 1. And we'll look first for any comments or nomination.
I nominate Barton Stern for chair for Appeals Board number 1.
I second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Motion made by Mr. Curtis, seconded by Mr. Crow, and motion carries. So we're voting, we are or are not using the computers, Mr.
Not.
Blau?
So
they'll just, like you said, you'll assume everybody says yes unless we say no, right?
that's correct. All right.
Okay.
So we have a chair of Assessment Appeals Board number 1, and now we need a vice chair.
Okay.
I nominate Vince Curtis for vice chair of the Appeals Board number 1.
Okay, and I will second the nomination. And so the motion is made and seconded and passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along, we'll go to the same chair and vice chair elections for Appeals Board number 2.
I nominate Mr. Sisk as chair, board number 2.
Okay, moved by Ms. Little, seconded by Ms. Ferris, and motion carries.
Just a second.
And Mr. Vlahakis, just tell me whenever you're ready.
And I'm ready for the vice chair.
Okay. Looking for a nomination for vice chair.
I nominate Patricia Little as vice chair for Appeals Board number 2.
Okay, moved by Mr. Sisk and seconded by Ms. Ferris, and motion carries. Well, that was easy. Okay, let's go next to public comments. It's time for anyone to comment on an item not on today's agenda. Okay, no one rushing to the podium, and so we'll go next to board comments. Any comments from the board?
No.
I would just like to say thank you very much to Ms. Porsche for your assistance on this board, and we will miss you dearly. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Little. Any other comments?
I think we all second that
Absolutely.
statement. Yeah.
Thank you again, Marina.
Thank you, Marina. I've really personally enjoyed all of the detailed information that you've brought to us and spirited discussions, which ensured that the board had all of the information that it needed to really make thoughtful and well-informed decisions. So we appreciate that. Any other board comments? Okay. I'll just reiterate, I discussed with some of the staff and the board members that this will be my last year on the board. And so my last meeting will be somewhere around the public meeting next year. So in case, or the annual meeting rather. So in case it ends before that, I'll just make quick comments now that it's been an honor to serve, and this year will be a great honor, and it'll be 16 years, and so time to do something new. And appreciate everything, and more than anything, the people who I've interacted with, the board, assessor staff, the staff in the clerk's office, and of course, county counsel's office. So thank you for that.
And I think likewise from all of us on the
Yes,
board.
absolutely. Thank you.
Great leadership.
Okay. Thank you. So will any other board comments? Okay. we'll go next to the regular agenda, and we'll start with the clerk of the board's presentation. Switching hats.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Brendan Vlahakis, Deputy Clerk of the Board. Rosa Gonzalez couldn't be here this morning. She's at the National Association of Counties Conference in Nashville, Tennessee today. So I will be presenting the Clerk of the Board's presentation. So first I'm going to start with some staff information. This is our organization chart to give you a little better idea of how the Clerk of the Board's office works as far as the Assessment Appeals Board. So we have our Clerk of the Board line staff, which I'm a part of, along with two other Clerk of the Board, Deputy Clerk of the Boards, and a office assistant. We report to Rosa Gonzalez, and she reports to Mike Pettit, our Assistant County Executive Officer, who reports to Mike Powers, our Chief Executive Officer, and above that is the Board of Supervisors, who appoints your board members. As many of you are aware, Rosa Gonzalez was promoted to Chief Deputy Clerk of the Board this year. Rosa oversees the various functions performed by the Clerk of the Board, such as Board of Supervisors, Air Pollution Control Board, Form 700s, and, of course, the Assessment Appeals Board. Rosa also serves as the CEO's community liaison and spends much of her time working with the community. That's part of the reason why she's at NACO today, is part of her work as the community liaison. Also new to our organization is Mike Pettit. He's our new Assistant County Executive Officer, Rosa's boss. He is not here today. Okay. He oversees many of the divisions of the CEO's office, one of which is the Clerk of the Board's office, so he has many divisions under him. Mr. Pettit previously served as the county's Chief Information Officer, so he has a long history with the county, and we're pleased to welcome him to the team. All right. So the Clerk of the Board provides many services. We have myself, along with Monica Sanchez, Jessica Cam, and Lori Gaines. We're your support staff that work with applicants and taxpayers on a daily basis. Monica assists with basic application issues and does all the data entry for applications we received, which becomes pretty high demand in September when the application filing period is coming to a close. And you may notice her recently. She's been sitting down with me at the board meetings, helping me check in and deal with some of the pre-hearing chaos. So we're expanding her role to help with assessment appeals in that way. Jessica assists me with appeal applicants answering their technical questions when I'm not available, and when the volume increases and our phones are ringing all day, she assists with that. Lori in our office is not directly involved with assessment appeals, but she does assist the rest of us when we have high impacts, but most of her time is spent on Board of Supervisors matters. My job includes answering technical questions about the assessment appeal process, connecting taxpayers to other offices to have their assessment and tax questions answered, ensuring incomplete applications are resolved, ensuring a copy of each application as quickly gets to the assessor, scheduling each application for hearing and sending notices, and recording your board's decisions. In addition to supporting your board and ensuring your meetings run smoothly, or as smoothly as possible given the unpredictable nature of assessment appeals. All right, so now I'm going to talk about some statistics over the past year. I've been preparing these statistics for years with the Clerk of the Board's office and then previously with the Assessor's office, and this is the first time I get to present them. I know a lot about these numbers, but I'll try to keep my comments short on them. So overall, we're kind of holding steady over last year to this year. 1,600 appeals last year to 1,500 this year. That's a pretty minor decrease. But that's better than an increase. We've had slightly less meetings this past year, just 2, but 1 more hearing officer, and they've, in my opinion, they've been fairly well balanced and efficient use of the board's time. So that is the filings for the past year. Our resolution times. We had slightly less applications resolved in the past year, but that's largely due to the decrease in filings and better turnaround times. As you see, the average months to resolve an application is down to 8.5 months, and as well as residential property, one of our key metrics, is down to 7 months. So these are very good numbers. We hope to continue the downward trend, but these are pretty close to as good as we're going to be able to get, but we'll keep striving to do better. And this is all due to the collaboration between the assessor's office, the clerk of the board's office, and your board. If everyone wasn't working together, we wouldn't be able to continue to provide these reduced times to the taxpayers of Ventura County. So it's really a team effort, and we thank everybody for that. And a new performance metric. It always surprises me when Rosa wants to track something new and I'm able to find that data out. Haven't been a number she wants that I haven't been able to figure out. So this is clerk of the board specific metrics. This is a new performance measure we came up with to show just improvements that the clerk of the board has direct control over. So just for comparison's sake, we have the number of applications filed each year. You'll see the first blue, days an application provided to the assessor's office. In 2015, it took us 74 days average to get it, and that was partly due to a new computer system we were implementing that came online late in the filing period. So you'll see really the true number starts in 2016. It was an average of 15 days overall for applications to release them to the assessor's office. In the past year, we got that down to 9 days from when we receive an application to when it gets to the assessor's office. And that's on the high end. That's taking into account when we're inundated in September versus when we get 1 or 2 a week in July. In July, we typically see about a 24-hour turnaround time to release it to the assessor's office, but we don't really have that many yet. So far this month, we only have 10 for this year. So we hope to keep that number below 9 this year for releasing to the assessor's office. The next number, after an application is filed, we try to get notice of hearing to the applicant as soon as possible so that they're aware we have their appeal, that someone's working on it, that they have their case number. So in the past year, we kind of switched. As you see, in 2015, it took us average of 251 days to tell an applicant. 2016, we got it down to 132. And then the past year, we got down to 69 days. The big change of that is we've been progressing from where we used to not notice hearings until the legal 45-day deadline before the hearing. Last year, we switched to try to do it 60 to 90 days in advance of the hearing. And in 2017, the reason we got it down to 69 days is as soon as we met our scheduling thresholds for a date, we would send out the hearing notices. So our threshold is 150 applications per hearing. So as soon as we get a date full, we'd send out all the notices. So we are moving to a front-end process rather than into the timeline process. So that's why we've seen improvements, and we're hoping to get that number down even lower this year and get applicants notice even sooner after they file their applications. The last number, days advance notice given to the applicant. That's how many days before the hearing we tell the applicant when their hearing is. So, 2015 was 80 days. That's right in our timeline of 60 to 90 days before the hearing. 2016 got down slightly lower. We were still kind of working on that close to the deadline. This year, we got it all the way up to 122 days advance notice, and that's due to the shift in when we send out notices. So that's saying, on average, an appeal applicant is getting 122 days advance notice to prepare for their hearing. So that allows to make scheduling accommodations, to reschedule, to get their information together. And in my opinion, that's shown a big improvement on people getting prepared for their hearing is getting that advance notice number up. And so this is all excellent trends we hope to continue in the coming year. So the clerk of the board's office will continue to improve our processes over the coming year. One example of something we're working on is the removal of the hearing officer's decisions from your assessment appeals board's agendas, which you all unanimously supported us making that recommendation to the board of supervisors. And so in the coming weeks or months, we'll be requesting the board of supervisors remove the requirement that you receive and file hearing officer's decisions. And then towards the end of this year, we will begin the process of recruiting additional board members to fill the impending vacancy and to see if we can fill some more alternate positions. And that's going to take some time due to the process by the state has changed since most of you came on board. So we're going to have to recruit new board members in compliance with the new state process. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Wow, thank you very much, Mr. Vlahakis. First, any questions or comments from the board?
I'd like to commend Brendan to doing a wonderful job, and especially in those hearing officer cases where you run a tight ship.
Thank you.
I agree. Any other comments, questions? Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Vlahakis, to you and everyone. And the statistics speak for themselves, and also the presentation that gets better every year, and with the pictures, and which is very helpful to me specifically.
Rosa gave me some freedom
thank you.
to do some stuff with it this year, so
That's great.
I went with it.
One thing
forgot
that, go ahead.
I forgot to mention, if anyone in the audience needs a copy, we do have printed copies of the presentation available.
Great. And one thing that the report doesn't show is the years prior to the statistics shown were either more, well, I guess less favorable in general, related to time to resolve and time of processing. So the difference that you and Ms. Gonzalez and the team have made has been really dramatic. So thank you.
Yeah, and the real test to that will be if filing is increased due to economic issues, if we can hold these numbers
Right.
or keep close to them. It'll be a difficult balance if we get to that point. But at least for the past year, we're holding steady, and hopefully we're around the same 1,500 number for the coming year. Make it easy to plan for the coming year.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's it.
Okay, next up is the County Council's presentation.
And if you'd like to.
I just want to introduce myself. My name's Emily Gardner. I am going to try to fill Marina's very big shoes and take over this assignment. I have about 5 years of county experience, and I was in private practice before, and I'm looking forward to this new challenge. So thank you all for having me.
Great. Welcome.
Welcome.
And next, the assessor's presentation.
Good morning, board members. I'm Brooke Hill, representing the assessor's office. I don't have a fancy presentation like Mr. Vlahakis did. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for your service and thank council for the very well thought out findings that you write. Those in particular help us a lot in preparing for future hearings. Sometimes we request them just to kind of get a feel for what you're thinking when you're deliberating. So I appreciate all the time you put into the hearings, the deliberations, and the findings of fact. That's very helpful to us. And I don't have, like I said, a fancy presentation. I'm just going to use my finger to introduce and point to the staff. These folks over here are the ones that do all the work behind the scenes and then occasionally come and bring things to the hearing room. But each and every one of their full-time jobs is to resolve assessment appeals. And so that's a lot of time we spend outside of the hearing room, trying to come to a resolution and explain things to taxpayers in hopes that we don't have to bring things to you. Sometimes we do. I'll go just in order of how they're sitting so I don't forget anybody. But the first person here, and maybe you guys can stand up as I call your name. This is Efren Azcora. He is a senior appraiser. He has experience with both real and personal property. His focus for the past several years has been personal property appeals. I know he's presented Walmart among other cases, boats and aircrafts and things like that. I anticipate you'll be seeing him more on the real property side in the coming months and years. Steve Bates is sitting next to him. He is also a senior appraiser. He actually works, he's our lead appraiser for exemptions, and then he also resolves assessment appeals, primarily commercial and industrial type properties. Rick Denham is our residential expert. He resolves probably 95% of all residential appeals, which is the vast majority by numbers. I always hear him on the phone, and he will spend hours on the phone explaining how Prop 13 works to taxpayers. He's been invaluable in our residential appeals. Next to him is Andrea Rovtar. She's an appraiser too, and she specializes in rural properties, C&I, special properties like possessory interests and things like that. And then Mindy DePoyen is also a senior appraiser. She focuses on C&I and pretty much any kind of property. She's also started working on the calamity appeals that we've started getting from the Thomas Fire. And last but certainly not least is Christopher Horn. He's our supervising appraiser. He is the one that leads this great group of folks and helps them stay organized and on track. And that's about it. And like I said, I'm Brooke Hill. I'm the chief appraiser. I manage the appeals team as well as a couple other specialized teams in our office. So if the board has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Otherwise, that's all I had.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Hill. Any comments, questions from the board?
I'd just like to say thank you. It seems like the assessor's office is taking a more proactive position in resolving the cases, so meaning less cases coming before the board. So I appreciate all the work behind the scenes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We always try to resolve them outside of the hearing room whenever possible.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from the board?
Thank you.
I'd also just like to acknowledge and thank everyone, the assessor staff, and really appreciate the time that you put into each of the appeals cases and the time that you put into all of the cases or the applications that we don't ever see, and not to mention the immense number of appeals and properties that you're responsible for that aren't appealed or that you're involved with. And so it's definitely recognized that it's the tip of the iceberg that we see. So we appreciate your dedication and your service to the county. Thank you. Okay, next, Mr. Vlahakis, we are receiving and filing a summary report related to active appeal applications. Does that sound right?
One item above that.
Oh, we're on?
Calendar.
Of course. This is one of the most important functions that Mr. Vlahakis has when I'm chairing a meeting, is to let me know when I've skipped an agenda item. So we'll go back to number 11 and assessment appeals calendar for 19.
And real quickly before I go into your calendar, I want to introduce Mr. Pettit in the back, point him out. This is our new assistant county executive officer, Mike Pettit. So that's Rose's boss.
Thank you, and welcome.
All right, so your calendar. So first I'm going to start. This is your calendar originally adopted this time last year for 2018. And so we do it, fortunately there's a lot of Monday holidays that prevent us from scheduling board meetings. So the beginning of the year we have more hearings than the end of the year. And we try to space them out at least 2 weeks. One thing Mr. Curtis may have noticed past years, we didn't do hearing officers the day after a full board. And that made it, for the clerk of the board staff, a lot less chaotic because we're not trying to prepare for 2 meetings at once. Instead, we offset it a week, and it's my understanding that helped the assessor's office as well, because a majority of the cases that go with the hearing officer are residential. That's the majority of cases we have overall. So doing back-to-back hearings was rather difficult for staff. And in my opinion, it worked very well offsetting the hearing officer a week from the full board. So we're planning to continue that trend for the coming year. And so your calendar from last year changed very little after adoption. You'll see the only thing really changed is we added some special hearing dates. Those are the ones with the X's. For special matters, Appeals Board 1 had one just a few weeks ago. Appeals Board number 2 just scheduled one for October for a major department store. And then Appeals Board 1 is going to have our first multi-day hearing in December. So that'll be interesting. But other than that, we didn't have to modify the schedule too much for the past year. One thing we're looking at is the December 3rd hearing, still reviewing that, might reassign that Assessment Appeals Board number 2 because of the multi-day hearing for Assessment Appeals Board number 1 in December. So we're looking at reassigning December 3rd, but I'll discuss that with the board members in the coming weeks. So this is your proposed calendar for 2019. It is similar to our calendar for 2018. I think we are possibly holding the exact same number of hearings, 6 for Assessment Appeals Board number 1, 5 for Assessment Appeals Board 2. I've spaced in 6 for the hearing officer, but we may only end up needing 5 like we did the past year. We'll keep an eye on that and see how it goes. We're still putting at least 2 weeks in between most hearings where we can. As you'll see again, there's a lot of Monday holidays in there that prevent us from holding appeals board meetings. And then hopefully plenty of room for the special hearings later in the year if we need them, but fingers crossed we won't need any special hearings. So that is your calendar. If you would like to make an option to approve it, make a motion to approve the calendar or recommend any changes, that's what we are requesting.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Vlahakis. First, are there any questions or comments from the board related to the calendar? And if not, we'll ask for a motion to approve.
I second.
Ms. Little, did you make the motion? Oh, did someone make the motion?
So moved.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, moved by Mr. Curtis, seconded by Mr. Sisk. And
does anybody object to approval? Okay, thank you.
okay, so the motion passes unanimously. And we'll go on next to item 12.
So item 12 is a summary report of applications that are near or passing the 2-year deadline. That's paper copies provided in your packets if you need to review that. So currently, we don't have anything past the 2-year deadline. We do have one coming up at the end of July, but it's got a waiver on file. And then in September is when most of them expire. But as you'll see, anything that expires in the near future does have a waiver on file. But we do try to keep as many appeals off calendar after 2 years as possible. We want to keep the resolution time down so that they don't put delays in other cases. So this is a little bigger than the prior year, but we're in pretty good shape so far. Most of these are scheduled for hearing in early October, and hopefully we won't see too many more delays in those, and we'll get this resolved shortly over the 2-year deadline. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this report. Otherwise, we are looking for a motion to receive and file.
Okay, are there any questions, comments from the board? Okay, so we'll look for a motion to receive and file the waiver to extend the hearing summary report.
So moved.
Okay, I believe moved by Mr. Curtis and seconded by Ms. Little?
I had
Ferris?
Ms. Ferris.
Okay, great. And unless there are any objections, we'll say that it passed unanimously. Okay. Next, we'll go to item 13, adoption of the 2018 Conflict of Interest Code for Appeals Board Number 1.
So this is just for board members Stern, Curtis, and Crow. The Board of Supervisors every 2 years requires that you review your conflict of interest code, ensure it's still appropriately outlined, and then submit a notice to the Board of Supervisors. And this is for what you're required to disclose on your Form 700 Statement of Economic Interests. The clerk of the board is recommending no changes. Your current disclosure is the broadest disclosure. And so we're recommending that you adopt the Conflict of Interest Code for Assessment Appeals Board Number 1 with no changes to the prior Conflict of Interest Code.
Okay, thank you. And just for anyone's reference, there's a copy of the, for Board Number 1, there's a copy of the current Conflict of Interest Code in the packet, which is about, it's behind the calendars, plus a few pages. So I'll ask, we can take a minute to review it, or if there are any comments or questions. Okay, don't hear any comments or questions, so if not, we'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, moved by Mr. Curtis, seconded by Mr. Crow, and the motion carries.
Thank you.
And we'll do the same next for Board Number 2, which is item 14 on the agenda.
Correct. As similar explanation, this is the Conflict of Interest Code for Assessment Appeals Board Number 2. We're not recommending any changes. Their Conflict of Interest Code was adopted when Assessment Appeals Board Number 2 was first established just under 2 years ago. So it's a fairly newer code, and we're not recommending any changes. Assessment Appeals Board Number 2 members do also have the broadest disclosure requirement. And so this is for board members Sisk, Little, and Hess to consider.
Okay, and so again, we'll take a minute if needed for anyone to review, and if not, we'll look for a motion to approve from Board Number 2.
So are we just reaffirming it?
Yeah. So you're approving that every 2 years you have to decide if any changes are necessary or not, and so for resubmission, so you'd be approving the Conflict of Interest Code for 2018.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Ms. Little and seconded by Mr. Hess, and motion carries. And then last but not least, item 15, the same for the hearing officer.
And this is just for Mr. Curtis. The hearing officer gets to adopt their Conflict of Interest Code. This is also under the broadest disclosure category for the Form 700, and we're not recommending any changes. Mr. Curtis just needs to decide if he's approving or not.
Approved.
Right. Don't know what this is going to do. It's probably going to show up as, okay, it shows up as passes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Vlahakis. And we'll next go to stipulation agreements section on the agenda, item 16. And is this for either both boards or?
Correct. Yeah, part of the
How should we do
the law requires that you meet the third Monday in July to equalize assessments, and so how we've met that requirement in the past is by putting stipulations before your board instead of scheduling actual valuation hearings. Unfortunately, we only received one since the last meeting, but at least we got one in to meet the legal requirement to equalize. So we have one stipulation before you for approval, and any and all board members can decide and vote to approve this.
Okay, and is this one that we received via email ahead of time, or
It was part
should
of
we
the
review it?
materials, yes,
Okay.
but there's a copy available for you to review if necessary.
Okay, and would anyone like to review it? I have the original here. We'll take our time.
I received it via email.
I didn't look at an email, sorry.
Did you get it emailed? Yes. Yeah, okay.
All right, and Mr. Curtis, Mr. Crowe? Okay, so we'll look for a motion to approve the stipulation unless there are any comments or questions.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Little, seconded by Mr. Curtis, and motion carries. That brings us to the end of the agenda. Thanks, it's good to see everyone in the room. Welcome again, Ms. Gardner, and we're adjourned at 10:12.